Look at the skyline of any modern megacity today, and you'll see a forest of glass towers proudly sporting top-tier green certifications. But beneath that glossy exterior, the math doesn't actually add up. This chart compares the actual energy usage of certified green buildings against standard, uncertified ones. The data reveals a massive failure rate. Up to 35% of these certified eco-friendly buildings draw more power than their conventional, uncertified neighbors. The problem lies in how these buildings earn their plaques in the first place. Architects are essentially playing a game of collecting checklist points, and they calculate their designs using historical weather data from decades ago. They aren't measuring how the building actually performs against the climate of today. That gap between theory and reality carries a staggering cost. In Bangkok, the extreme urban heat island effect is so severe that it costs the city over $3 billion every single year in lost productivity and heat-related health impacts. This reliance on paper standards over local physical reality turns lethal when the ground itself moves. In March 2025, a magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck Myanmar. Despite being over 1,000 kilometers away, the seismic waves were amplified by Bangkok's unique geology, causing a 33-story building to sway until it collapsed. Treating architecture as an exercise in chasing green award points is failing. To withstand the escalating threats of the modern climate, the industry has to abandon the checklist and shift to a rigorous, data-driven survival strategy. A major part of the problem comes from importing Western building logic into tropical megacities. When you take guidelines designed for cold climates and apply them to hot, humid environments, you create a dangerous physical paradox, especially when dealing with moisture. In a cold environment, moisture inside a heated building wants to escape outwards. But in the tropics, intense solar radiation bakes the outside of the building. This triggers a process called inward vapor drive, where the sun forcefully pushes humidity from the outside directly into the building's interior. Western building codes often dictate placing a vapor barrier on the inside face of the wall. In the tropics, that interior barrier catches all that incoming humidity and traps it right inside the walls. The result is rapid toxic mold growth and severe sick building syndrome. The exact same backwards logic happens out on the streets. Planners often install high-tech, reflective, cool pavements to lower the surface temperature of the asphalt. But that solar radiation doesn't just disappear. It bounces right off the street and blasts directly into the pedestrians, making the city feel significantly hotter. The data shows that the most effective solution is remarkably low-tech. Thick, dense tree canopies absorb the radiation rather than reflecting it, lowering the mean radiant temperature by an impressive 35%. Importing Western environmental logic into the tropics creates buildings that are both energy inefficient and physically hazardous to occupy. The city's structural integrity is inseparable from the soil properties beneath the foundation. Bangkok sits atop a deep basin of soft marine clay. That thick layer of soft soil acts like a massive amplifier. When long-period seismic waves travel hundreds of miles from a distant earthquake, they hit this soft basin and dramatically increase in size and intensity. It turns a faraway tremor into a lethal threat for tall, rigid structures. And that soil isn't staying put. Groundwater extraction has caused the city's land to subside, historically sinking up to 120 millimeters a year. As the ground drops away, it pulls down on the sides of the concrete foundational piles, adding immense physical stress to the structure even before a quake hits. This extreme stress leads to microcracks in the concrete, opening the door for a chemical process called carbonation. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere seeps deep into those cracks, neutralizing the concrete's alkaline protection. Once that barrier is gone, the internal steel reinforcement grid begins to rot and rust from the inside out. You cannot rely on a generic national building code to predict how a skyscraper will react to sinking clay, rusting steel, and amplified shockwaves. Surviving these specific local hazards requires meticulous, site-specific physical modeling for every single structure. To actually design a building that will last, engineers are abandoning old climate records and turning to a predictive tool known as future weather morphing. Instead of looking backward, they use AI to inject climate change projections directly into their building models. Under moderate emission scenarios,
Models predict Bangkok will face an additional 153 days of extreme heat every year by the year 2100. This chart demonstrates how engineers use machine learning to run thousands of design permutations in seconds. By calculating the absolute perfect window sizes, shading angles, and daylight access, this optimization process can slash a building's cooling energy demands by over 44%. We are moving into a climate that humanity has never experienced. Data-driven, predictive AI is the only practical way to engineer structures that can handle weather patterns that do not even exist yet. But even the smartest energy models rely on the power staying on. The ultimate threat to any tropical megacity is a total grid failure during a 45-degree heat wave. This introduces a new architectural imperative known as passive survivability. It's the strict requirement that a building must be able to maintain safe, survivable interior temperatures for at least 72 hours without a single drop of mechanical power. We already have proof that this works. The National University of Singapore's SDE-4 building uses true performance-based design, combining high thermal mass and advanced natural ventilation, to the point where it actually generates more energy over a year than it consumes. You don't need a multi-million-dollar institutional budget to pull this off. In Ho Chi Minh City, the stacking greenhouse approaches passive survivability with brilliant, low-tech simplicity. The front and back of the house are stacked with concrete planters that filter out direct sunlight, block street noise, and funnel cool breezes straight through the living space. Even in the brutal Vietnamese heat, the residents barely need their air conditioning, keeping their electricity bills to just $25 a month. We can no longer afford to treat architecture as an exercise in collecting arbitrary points for a plaque on the wall. To survive the escalating heat, storms, and tectonic shifts of tomorrow, our buildings must become meticulously engineered tools for human survival.